The Old School is brought to you by Ahart Solutions, which provides school surveys and applied research. More information at ahartsolutions.com. Good morning and welcome to The Old School, podcast about the American education system. It includes other things, but as it happens, today we will talk about the American education system. And with that, in my endeavor is Dr. Stephen Bourgeois. Good morning, Dr. Bourgeois.
Good morning, Mr. Miller. Good to see you there.
Good to see you as well. And our first three-time guest.
It is.
Dr. Rick Westfall. Good morning, Rick.
Oh, morning. How are you?
I think it's going to be like Saturday Night Live, how they have like special jackets for the people who have hosted for like more than 5 or 6 times.
Sure.
Get like a special jacket.
Yeah, that's always good to have special jackets. It's a visual on a podcast.
You can wear it around town. It'll generate questions, and it will become like a walking advertisement for the Old School.
Right.
But
it's been good for our audience because we've expanded into about 50 countries, and I don't know if you're responsible for that, but we have listeners all over the world, and I attribute it to you coming back a third time.
Well, I highly doubt that, but I would say it's more Ketchum than it is Westfall.
Okay.
Well, I'm still curious about the one guy in Namibia. I'm going to go ahead and attribute that to you. So
okay, yeah, my pen pal.
I appreciate you reaching out to him. So, but well, before we get started, so I was at a baseball game last night where I saw my Baltimore Orioles put a whooping on the Texas Rangers, a team that I otherwise adore. And I was with a buddy of mine and his 8-year-old son. And at the beginning of the game, I told the boy, I said, listen, just so you know, if I catch a foul ball, I'm not giving it to you. I said, I'm not going to fight you for it. I said, you if it's a scrum, it's all yours. But if it comes directly to me and I catch it, you don't get it. This 8-year-old looks at me and he said, respect. Really? And I thought, well, so I figured this is my way of trying to prep the younger generation that life includes a little suffering, and that maybe
it does.
You have to wait for a foul ball.
Yeah, it's always good to one up an 8-year-old.
It's not one upping; it's simply letting the person know, the kid know.
Sure, right? Yeah, that I'm better than you.
Yeah. Well, no, it's not. I'm better than you.
No, that's just kind of what I heard.
No, yeah, I think your upper respiratory infection has affected your
It's
hearing.
my medicine. My
medicine's great for talking.
It's got a whole nother. This is going to go a whole nother way today, I think.
I think the Benadryl is going to make this conversation much more riveting.
Oh, I like it. You made that same speech when my youngest son was probably in middle school. We went to a Rangers game, I'm sure, because that speech sounds really familiar, but I think you said the same thing. And
I'm not going to apologize for this. I had to wait 47 years for a foul ball.
But you already got one, right?
I have one now. Yes, I had to wait 47 years for it. When I was 8 years old at Memorial Stadium in Baltimore, I had grown adults boxing me out for a ball. I mean, it was not a given that kids got balls, and I think nowadays we're doing them a disservice.
So, can I ask the question, Ross?
Sure.
Since you laid out if the ball's coming to me, it's going to be mine, not yours kind of scenario. Is there a radius? Like, is there around you that this is my area of I will catch it? And in other words, is it fair game that you catch it above his head because he can't quite reach it and there wouldn't be a scrum, but you would have obviously gotten into his space where he would have caught it?
If I catch it, it's mine.
Makes no difference.
But if I don't catch it, if it doesn't come to within my ability to, I'm not going to knock him down.
Sure.
But I mean, but if I can reach from my seat.
But if he has his glove up and it's literally going to land in his glove, but because he's short and you're taller, you stick your hand above his glove and catch it, it's yours.
No, I wouldn't do that.
Oh, okay.
But I'm not a monster.
Well,
That's a good point of clarification.
yeah, you went up in my book. I would love for there to be a picture on the jumbotron of you stealing a ball from an 8-year-old and getting booed.
But it's gotten to the point though that even if a guy catches it cleanly, even if it comes right to a seat, there seems to be this societal pressure now to give it to a kid
To give it, yeah,
who wouldn't value it, who doesn't understand the value of the ball. It's just an oddity of his experience that a ball came to him or that he walked away with a ball.
yeah.
Oh, anyway,
That's
So that was a metaphor for the education system and parenting. Is that what you're getting at?
wow.
it's a metaphor of life.
You're pretty clever here, Miller. You once again you prepared for the episode.
Well, today we're going to be talking about school culture, and there probably is no better person to talk about it than Rick Westfall. So when I first in 2013, I got hired at Keller High School, and almost immediately I started trying to learn a little bit about the history of the school. I created this huge document with the idea that we were going to do something with it about the history of the school. And there were several names that came up in rather reverential terms. Some previous principals that you may be aware of, uh, Randy Baker, Jamie, uh,
Wilson.
oh shoot, Wilson, yes, Jamie Wilson, what have you, and Rick Westfall. And a lot of it had to do with your ability to connect with people. If I'm not mistaken, Keller was your first principal job. Is that correct?
No, I actually I led the 910 campus over in Carroll next door.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Yes.
So I was there well, I was in that building for 9 years, but I was the principal there for 4 before I came over to Keller High. So it was my first comprehensive high school.
Gotcha. So as a principal, you've got three um, groups that you must figure out how to work with: the students, the teachers, and the parents, not to mention the administration of top or what
Sure.
have you. How do you go about for one, what was the toughest nut for you to crack of those three, and how did you do it?
The toughest nut. um, a conversation that I remember having with my supervisor when I first got to Keller is I was doing a lot of um, evaluating of the people, of the culture, of what was needed in the high school, and I quickly came to the understanding that we were just going to have to spend a lot of time with culture, with people feeling good about where they were at and what they were doing. And um, I distinctly remember having a conversation with my supervisor, and I told him, I said, listen, I know there's a lot of different, academic goals and tasks and stuff you're going to want me to tackle as an instructional leader, but I just need you to know that it's going to be a year before I do any of that, because no one's going to hear me say any of those things until I get this culture situated. So when you say toughest nut to crack, I think part of that was the willingness to, and I wasn't standing up to anybody. He was fine with my comment, but it's that willingness to, well, are you willing to set priorities and set what needs to happen first, which is culture? Because ultimately, if you don't have that, you're not going to get any of the other pieces accomplished. But with teachers and kids and really parents, the one thing I did discover when I left the high school, and I went over to be a central office administrator over in Grapevine Colleyville, it was amazing how quickly parents distrusted my decisions when I wasn't on a campus. And what I found was when you don't have the medium of kids that are going home and giving good feedback and good reports to parents, then parents are going to draw their own conclusions. So at a campus, as long as you're taking care of kids and you're doing what you need to do, the parents are like, hey, we're good, because they're just, they hear what's going on in the building from their kids.
So this is something obviously that I study every day, with my research firm. But you said something, fascinating about trust. And particularly the difference between a campus leader and then the central office. And we're not saying they're bad
Right.
people. But I think that there's less insight into their day-to-day work. Um, but the idea of trust seems to be consistent for students trusting their teachers, and they make a judgment real early, and faculty, you're under the microscope for quite a while. I think your idea of a year makes a lot of sense. um, but I wonder, forget the central office for now. I think that's another really
Sure.
interesting question, but how do you gradually, maybe with a drip approach, build trust with faculty who there's naturally some tension, there has to be.
Well, I'll tell you exactly what I did. So when I got there to Keller High, it was in the middle of summer. Um, I was getting ready to go out of town for probably a couple weeks, and I remember bringing in the existing department chairs before we left town because I just wanted to at least connect with the teacher leaders, so they would know who the heck I was and put a name to the face before I left. And I was just really clear of here's what my expectations are going to be of my teacher leaders. And the reason why I did that, number one, again, was to just start creating that relationship. But two, is this what you want to do? Is this how you're going to want to move forward as a teacher leader if these are the new sets of expectations? And I remember one of the department chairs came up to me afterwards. He goes, "Hey, listen, I get it. I think you're doing exactly what you need to do, and I'm not your guy.
Ah,
So
wow.
we'll figure it out when you get back in town, but I'm not your guy to pull this off." So that was the first step. The first step was to bring that smaller group together. Then the second step really was the very first day that I had with my teachers and everybody at Keller High in the auditorium. And I spent that first presentation just telling them about me, telling them about my family, telling them about my faith, telling them about my just how I'm wired, because I think it's super important for any leader to be transparent about who they are, because people are trying to figure out, are you worth following? Are you someone who I want to follow? And when you just kind of lay it all out there and just like, I'm just another guy that can, I understand education and here's who I am, then uh, it helps make those connections. And then the third step, so there's a three-part thing. The third step was me promising them that I would meet with every single person in the building, and had a set of questions, and I would listen to what they wanted me to hear about the campus. Now remember, in a high school, this is like 150 people. And so I got a lot of feedback of, yeah, there's no way you're ever going to pull that off. There's no way you're ever going to be able to get everybody. And by October, I had every single person come through my office to tell me concerns, celebrations, whatever it was about Keller High, so that we knew how to craft a plan moving forward. And to me, that's the trust piece, because not only did I intentionally do that and spend that time, but then we followed through with it. It wasn't just about lip service and then not doing anything.
So Rick, do you mind telling us what you asked them specifically? Because it wasn't just a casual conversation. I'm sure you had a few things you wanted to ask somebody.
That's 15 years ago. I mean, it really, well, I actually had a set of questions, but it turned into, I do remember that with the teachers, I very rarely stuck to the questions, because once we started talking, I just ended up kind of following wherever they wanted to go. But it was as simple as just getting started with, tell me what you need me to know about Keller High. What are your frustrations? What do you want me to know about it? And it didn't take long to start piecing together the culture piece of where the problems were, and everybody was on islands, and there really wasn't that collaborative feel in the building.
It's not an easy thing to go to a group of teachers individually and ask them what's wrong or what is your evaluation? Because teachers are a rather kvetching lot by nature, and they tend, and especially high school teachers, elementary, I imagine a lot of this borders on stereotypes, but it seems like elementary teachers are just wired differently than high school teachers. And high school teachers, it seems from the start, come in with this rather world weary, cynical kind of notion about what's possible, what's not possible. And so, is it, nowadays the modern example, it seems, for interpersonal relations between boss and staff is like Ted Lasso. Is it kind of like just beating them down with the notion of your expectate, not beating them down, but just kind of a constant, that drip mentality that Steve mentioned of here's what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to promise I'm going to do, and just constantly be mindful of doing that.
Yeah. Well, what was funny about it is that I had some teachers who just, because literally I had a sign up sheet in my office or outside my office. And about a month in, I asked Debbie Rowan, my secretary, I said, hey, let's do a little evaluation of who all's signed up and who still hasn't done it. And then I want you to send emails to all of them and those who haven't, and tell them that this was a serious request and you still have to sign up. And the people that didn't sign up, going back to your point, Ross, about secondary teachers, and I was a secondary teacher, so I can say these things. There are some teachers at secondary level that are just like, whatever, I'm not irritated about anything. I'm not super excited about anything. I'm going to do my thing with the kids, and we'll get along, we'll go along to get along. And they didn't really have anything to say. So, that drip piece was the follow through. It was it's okay to not talk to me. And that wasn't an option. You needed to talk to me, even if it was, I have nothing to say. Because it told me a lot. I mean, the people that came in, I full well that when you're in a department full of 15 to 20 teachers, who pretty quickly who the teachers are that need a little more attention, and who the teachers are that you're good. They're going to be good. Just give them a little space. And that was good for me to be aware of too.
I think that's a wonderful exercise, not only for a new principal to a campus, but first of all, I like the idea that you talk to every adult in the building, not just the teaching staff.
That's right.
That's making a really important point. But also, as a experienced principal, there's no reason why that wouldn't be a yearly thing. And I can't see a much better use of a principal's time. But not just as new to the campus, throughout the time there.
Yeah. So the one mistake that I made is exactly what you just said. Mm-hmm. It became for me, if I were to do it all over again, it was my first year thing, but then I wasn't able to keep it going in year 2 or 3. Because I did what I discovered was I had some grace with my time at the beginning of the year for my first year, but second year and third year, I didn't have as much grace with my time. So that's an excuse. And if I were to do it again, I would redo it and say, this is going to be an annual event. Because what it would have shown me is, when you do it for the first year, when you're first coming in, you're going to hear all the things going on from the previous leadership. What should happen is every year, so that now you're starting to see is what you're doing having an impact, and is it successful or not successful, and how do you adjust? So, that surveys, that's what campus surveys are. But I think there's a different. You're going to get different feedback when you're face to face with someone in the office.
For sure, and asking somebody what's important to them.
That's right.
That's a transformative question, because everybody is different. It shows you care about them.
Yep.
We were talking to Dr. Alex Fingers at Grapevine, and talking about the notion of school culture, and his past and his experience really kind of impacted how he went about trying to build culture what aspect of your previous experience before you got into administration or before you got into that level of administration, what was it about your experience that kind of shaped how you approached either teachers or parents or, or kids?
Um, that's a good question. I'm going to try to answer that without it sounding negative towards things or people, but I think there's always experiences you have of things that you're going to want to do and things that you'll never want to do. Um, that obviously in my career, we overlapped in part of that career of where you could probably figure out what I'm talking about of things that I
Yes.
probably wouldn't want to do for culture, but the 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 um probably where I did want to say this too, that the idea of what I accomplished when I was taking over Keller High, that idea didn't just come out of the blue from, hey, that's a great idea, Rick. I bet no one has ever thought of that, to sit down and talk to people. That comes from connecting with mentors and connecting with people who have had the experiences. And my mentor is who I got that idea from, of making sure that there's a 90-day plan in place of what you're going to do in the first 90 days or the first 100 days. Not unlike sometimes you hear the first 100-day plan from elected officials.
Mhm.
So that was part of that process. But going back to the question of where do you get that from? Well, to me, I think a lot of it is figuring out who you are, how you're wired. Can you pull that off? Because some people, if they're not wired that way, they're not going to be successful. So just because like operationally, it's something you should do. If it's not how you're wired to actually hear it and then operationalize it, then it actually can be problematic. Like it would have been really problematic for me to go through that whole process and then people see absolutely nothing came from it.
Mhm.
So if you're not able to listen to that feedback and then create plans as a result, then that's an issue.
It is you said you didn't want to necessarily be negative, but in a kind of a context that I think most people might understand who's listening. I love my parents, and my parents were great, but they weren't great all the time. I mean, there were some things, before my daughter was born, there were some things that I remember thinking to myself, I need to make sure I do that. And then there were some things that said, I got to make sure not to do that,
Right.
that there was this kind of this give and take. And I think that's
Sure.
kind of fair, to kind of look upon. I used to say this with my students, when they did presentations, because I got tired of the same kind of staring at the PowerPoint and staring at the ceiling. I said, you
Yeah.
folks are experts on what good teaching looks like. You've seen good teachers, you've seen bad teachers. Try to be more like the good teachers. And then inevitably it didn't necessarily work out the way I planned. But I think that's a fair give and take, from your mentors, or not even your mentors, just the previous leadership that you've had. You take what's good, you leave what's bad.
Well, and I'll add to that. Some people I might have seen something as bad, where someone else might have seen it as a good leadership.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily. I don't know that there's universal. I mean, I think there are universal rules around certain leadership
Right.
faux pas,
Yeah.
but when it gets into the gray and it's just personal preference about how you're either going to lead or receive leadership, I will tell you. I mean, as a high school principal, again, kind of like as a high school teacher, we are just wired to be stinkers. And we're wired to just not. We're wired to push back a little bit. And I was a pain in the butt as a high school principal because
Mm-hmm.
it was my wiring to make sure that I was doing everything that I should do for my campus. I was very protective of my campus. Um, and so as a result, that bled into my conversations and my interactions with central office. that wasn't necessarily a great, from someone else's perspective, that wasn't necessarily a great leadership quality. That was me, because I wasn't necessarily, because then when my dynamic shifted and then I was in central office, then I was seeing what was going on when people push back at me. Like, okay, now I see, now I see where the issues come when certain leadership, quote unquote, leadership qualities manifest themselves. So it's not always like this is exactly the right way to do it.
I wonder if there's the same mechanism where you get trust from a faculty over time. You have to earn that, and it's always changing, but it's still a process. But somebody with a title, in a department of, district office type supervisory role, they need to do the same thing. And suddenly they have 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 principals that they're supervising. Same process. And
Right.
can you give us a little insight into that? Because, a lot of people don't know that principals have bosses that might not be the superintendent.
Yeah, it is. Well, I think a lot of it is understanding or placing the importance of the roles. So when I would repeat it, but I started with the very first time that I came into the room with all 42 principals at Keller ISD when I was the superintendent there, and I clearly told them with my cabinet in their presence that when it came to leadership, when it came to um, accomplishing the things that were going to be accomplished in the district, it was the campus principals that were the linchpin of the whole thing. Because we can come up with all the fun ideas, we can come up with all the crazy, here's the things we're going to do, instructions, here's the things we're going to do to implement. But if we don't have good leadership at the campuses, then it's just a lot of great ideas on paper. And I think understanding the importance, even though your title might be higher, even though organizationally you might be somewhere else, in hierarchy of that organization, understanding the importance of the person, of the position, is critical, even if you're the supervisor.
So, but how do you, one of the things we've talked about before is the idea of how principals have tried to, because Steve mentioned the idea of the tension that can exist between teachers and administrators. And part of that tension is, well, it's just the natural tension between the workers and the bosses. And different principals try different things. Some principals will try to keep meetings like breezy. Some will try to say, "Hey, call me by my first name," that sort of thing. There's these various tactics. How did you go about, whether you were talking about, you know, relating to other principals as superintendent or relating to other teachers as the principal? How did you go about trying to diffuse that tension? Was it something specific, or was it just a general kind of mannerism that you carried with you each day?
I didn't overthink it. I mean, I don't think I like intentionally did anything different than just be me and be real and be like I said at the beginning, be very transparent about everything that's going on. Have transparent conversations with your teachers. When we were going through all of the crazy budget cutting back in 2010, from the first round of state shenanigans, I remember coming back from the district with, here's how this is going to play out at every campus or at the campuses. And oh, by the way, as a principal, you're responsible for sending that message. For Keller High, I was having to figure out how to let go of 27 people. And some of that was going to be brand new people that it was just quote unquote easier to move on because they were on probationary contracts. We just weren't going to renew them at the end of the year. For other people, it was going to be reassigning them to other campuses where there were openings, and then there were going to be some people just let go. And I distinctly remember being in a lecture hall. You remember the lecture hall, Ross? Standing down there in the lecture hall and just honestly walking everybody through exactly how it was going to go. Here's a situation we're in. Here's why we're in it. Here's how it's going to play out. This isn't the message anybody wants to hear, but I couldn't sugarcoat it. I mean, they just needed to hear it. And frankly, if I remember correctly, I do remember correctly. There was a lot of weeping at that, because it was. I mean, when you build a culture of family, and then you're having to deliver that kind of message, it doesn't
incongruent.
Yeah, very much so. So, they saw me. I mean, they saw me real. They saw me raw. And I think I even though the people that got the ultimate message of they weren't going to be there anymore didn't necessarily, they weren't going to be my best buddies or give me a big hug. But they at least understood from the beginning. It wasn't a surprise to them how this was all going to go.
So looking at culture, we've mentioned a few different perspectives. I've found that student perceptions of culture is really based on their grade level. The third and fourth and fifth graders are happy, and then they're grumpy in sixth and seventh grade, and then it creeps up a little bit. Doesn't matter what you ask them. But the group we haven't really talked about is parents, and they have a limited sample as far as evaluating, whether they like the school or particularly the school leader, because they get communications, they have what their kid tells them at the dinner table, hopefully, and maybe the car line if it's younger kids. But they're going to get a perception. Some parents don't even know the name of the principal, honestly, which is a little bit humbling. But can you talk about parents and how you bridged that so they had maybe a better insight into what you're doing?
Yeah, and you're exactly right. I mean, every chance you get to connect with parents, whether it's at the beginning of every day, you're out standing at the parent drop-off line where they're dropping off their kids. They at least see you. They see your face. They see you interacting with their kids. Very rarely did I interact with any parents in that drop-off line, but they saw me interacting with their kids. I remember one kiddo that was he was on the struggle bus at the beginning of the year with all of his band stuff. He couldn't get out of the car. He had instrument and lunch bag and backpack and I went over and helped him get out of the car and helped him kind of get situated on the way in. And the mom, like 3 years later, came up to me and just said, you just need to understand that moment of just helping my child out of the car not only was an impact to him because he saw an adult that was taking care of him, but I felt good about letting him go into that building because he's got someone who's looking out for him. And I think that's the whole thing. I mean, parents want to trust that their kids are being taken care of. And so whether it's newsletters that are keeping them informed and communication and not, as long as parents feel like things aren't being hidden from them, or just that kind of interaction where they just see you, they see your presence. High school principals are at everything, literally everything.
Yeah.
And even if it's for 20 minutes, you were there, and you were supporting and you were taking care of the kids in that building. So that's there. I probably had a handful of parents that I actually interacted with on a regular basis, PTA and all the groups where parents are highly involved. You interact with them all the time, but the majority of parents you don't interact with. They just see you. They just see you around and they see you supporting, and that's the key.
Okay. So I know a lot of assistant principals complain about having to attend events they're assigned to, but they're kind of doing the same thing. They have an opportunity to interact, but more importantly, to be seen
That's right.
by the students and also the parents so they can connect on a different level.
Yeah. Yep.
One of the things that I think you excel at, and Steve and I have both said it's an important element to interpersonal relationships with teachers and students, parents, what have you. and we both tried to do it. I don't know if we do it as well. Is humor, and I'm wondering to what extent do you attribute humor as your ability to make those connections? I mean, if you to your point that you say you didn't overthink things. If you're a good person and a competent professional, you're going to have success. And you're going to have the kind of things that you want as far as interactions with parents and teachers. But there's something about someone who has the ability to joke, to express humor, to not do so in a kind of a cruel way or mean way or kind of to use a modern parlance, to punch down kind of a thing. To what degree do you see humor as a part of that process?
I mean, to me, that's huge, and it's even a little self-deprecating. Humor. It's don't think too much of yourself. Humor. It. I think it really tears. Well, not tears down. Not the right phrase. It breaks down that barrier of you're this important person and you have an important title, so you're really not approachable. You're really not. I really can't connect with you because you have this aura about you because of your title, and when you can come out and be to some extent somewhat goofy or funny or, like I said, self-deprecating, or if you can find the right people to make fun of that aren't going to be hurt by it, then to me that's the whole thing. We had a teacher. It was so at Keller High, and I still remember it. We were in a faculty meeting, and I don't remember what it was about. I don't remember the topic, but I was saying something. He just decided to zing me right in the middle of the faculty meeting. I mean, just everybody heard it. And I had an immediate choice of, is this going to be, me being dad and responding, or am I going to play this thing off? Because it could have gone sideways, if I got my feelings hurt. So instead, I zinged him back in a fun way, sending the message, but kind of in a fun way. Everybody laughed, and he told me after the fact, he goes, "Now you see, that's the reason why I will follow you wherever you want me to go, because we can have fun. I can zing you. Probably wasn't appropriate, but you just, you took it and just threw it right back at me, and that's what makes this campus fun." And to me, that's the whole thing. I mean, you just can't think so much of yourself that you can't play it back with people.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways in which you can kind of express that. I mean, some people express it by opening themselves up to legitimate criticism if the kids have a problem. I used to have quotes on my wall, and one of them was, "If you want to know who controls you, just find out who you're not allowed to criticize." And I had one kid ask me one time, "Can I criticize you?" Yeah, so if you're nice about it, sure. And I think, but I think humor kind of works the same way. It kind of equals the playing ground a little bit, and as far as just that interpersonal aspect of things.
It really is. It's a really fine line. I mean, it really is. There is a balancing act, because if you rely on it too much, then you're just the goofball that doesn't really know how to lead. You're just you don't. No one really takes you seriously. So there is an understanding your audience. There's an understanding, at what point is it appropriate, or what point is it not appropriate. And I think that's just experience, and that's just knowing your people and knowing who you can have that conversation with.
For me, it was very difficult because I was one of those people who I believed in the line between me and the kiddos. And I always used to say I'm friendly, but I'm not friends. But when you interject humor into the classroom, there will become, because teenagers are probably known to do this more than anybody else, and that is they're always the one to take that one step beyond what should be, either because of appropriateness or familiarity, which I was always kind of attuned to. I didn't appreciate someone being over familiar with me or crossing that line. And like you said, it's key on how you respond to that. It's saying something to the effect of, "Okay, you're not allowed to speak for the rest of the class," and say it in such a way that everyone kind of giggles or laughs, what have you. It's kind of a gentle admonishment or everyone was thinking it, but no one said it except for
Right.
you. You know, so
Right.
that kind of thing. So with high schoolers in particular, that is a tricky ground to walk.
Yeah. Well, and remember, I mean, there's a difference between interacting that way with an adult and interacting that way with someone
Right.
whose frontal lobe hasn't even been fully formed yet. So, I mean, it's it you do. I mean, if and I did. I'm sure I did this when I was a classroom teacher. I probably had that same thing. But there is a point when you can't do that with high school kids
Right.
versus doing that with adults. Um, and I think that's where adult learning and adult interaction is just it's different because they bring different experiences to the table. They bring different scars to the table and different
Yes.
emotions to the table of when something might have happened that someone might have been sarcastic with them and it hurt their feelings. And so then when I did it, then it brought up wounds, who knows, but there,
Right.
you just have to, like I said, you just kind of have to know who your people are, and know who you can do that with and who you can't.
So some teachers are really comfortable around students and they do that real
Yeah.
naturally, and students have a feel for that. I think that's the same thing with the principal and their staff. Some
Agreed.
are comfortable in the room with them, some aren't. I've seen extremes where a principal will silo and they won't come out of that office for a half of school year, essentially. I mean, they'll come out when they
Right.
do. I've seen the other. Actually, I had a principal who sat in the hallway occasionally with his
Mm-hmm.
laptop.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, that was
Mm-hmm.
someone Dr. Hollingsworth did that.
Yep.
And sat up
Cool.
there. I thought it was great because he's seeing students, they're seeing him. It's what do you think of that idea, first of all? Because I want to know if I should
What he
recommend
called it,
it.
like Dr. Hollingsworth on location or something like that, didn't
Yeah, it was really
he?
cool,
Yeah.
I thought.
Yeah.
And I just don't know if I should recommend it to my clients, say this is a task, but it seems like there's a lot of positives to that.
No, I think it's well, and Jerry is he is so extroverted and
Mhm.
interpersonal
You
that
bet.
if he doesn't have that interaction with people, he's going to melt down. I mean, it's just, and I can say that because he and I he's one of my best friends. So
Mhm.
I mean, Jerry needs that interaction, and I think that's what made him such a great high school leader,
Mhm.
because people appreciated that interaction and appreciated that intentional desire. And again, it comes back to if you have someone whose personality, if they're sitting at the table and someone comes and sits down and has a conversation with them and it's awkward and it's like now I got to figure out how to get out of this conversation and I don't know how to get out of it kind of thing. I should have never sat down to begin with. If that's their personality, then they just shouldn't do it. Just don't try to force something that's not you. That was probably one of my biggest issues is I spent early on in my administrative leadership years, I spent way too much time trying to emulate what someone else did
Mhm.
and asking myself questions of, well, is this what my mentor would have done? And it finally, when I finally got to the point of, well, it doesn't make any difference. He made fantastic decisions, but some of those decisions, I can make the same decisions, but I might not be able to execute them the same way as he could. So that's where you just have to, you take what you can do, you take what you can't do, and then you make sure you either accommodate or you modify some way. But not everybody can pull off the go sit at a table and be there all day long. They just can't.
Right. It's intriguing because having conversations. Ross and we actually wrote this in our book. That there was another principal, Robin Ryan, actually,
Yep,
and he was
that's who
my
I keep talking about my mentor. It's right.
Yeah. Well, he was at Colleyville Heritage when I was teaching
Yep.
German. And
Yep.
I just noticed that in the mornings he would talk to teachers. He would walk around with a cup of coffee, and he
Yep.
wasn't doing anything but talking to teachers, just
That's right.
talking. And the impression wasn't that it was anything else. It was just him doing that, and it was impactful, because it just never stopped. He'd just do that in the morning, and it was great.
Right. Right. That's whenever I say my mentor, that's who
Mhm.
I'm talking about. And there were some things that he was able to pull off and do that I was able to replicate most of those things.
Mm.
And then there's other things, and he would even tell you that there's things that I would be able to do that really weren't in his wheelhouse. So I mean, that's what made us such a good team. And Carroll, when we were all together, I don't know if you knew this or not, but he and I and Jerry were all on the same team in Carroll at one point.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive, and it must have been a lot of fun too.
It was, yeah, there were many times when we didn't really get a whole lot of work done.
Yeah,
Had a little too much fun.
It's one of those things that as a history teacher, you think about the history teachers that are the stereotypical history teacher is one that can just sit down and tell stories. And I've never been that easy in conversation, as far as like, when I was a department chair, it was something that I was constantly having to work on because I just don't have that ease sometimes when talking to people. I mentioned Randy Baker earlier, and people like him that, my colleague at Keller, David Clemens, he could sit and talk and tell stories. And there's almost and I think sometimes people dismiss it as kind of like a good old boy kind of thing. But there's a reason why that works, though, because just a person's ability to sit down in a casual way and immediately put somebody at ease.
Yeah.
It's not an easy thing to pull off. And I can't do it. And I try, but it is something that I admire it. But it's one of those things that where your method has to fit your personality. You have to, it's the difference between looking at a mentor as a model or as a blueprint.
Right.
It has to be a model because it ultimately has to fit my personality.
Right. Yeah. And that is, when you were just saying that, it brought me back to a conversation I had with somebody one time about hiring for assistant principals. And there was a particular person on the campus who had they'd done everything they were supposed to do.
Mhm.
They checked all the boxes. They had, they got the masters. They'd gone through all the leadership stuff at the district level. They'd done all the things that they were supposed to do to be an assistant principal. And every time I would talk to them, based on what my needs were on the team, they just weren't the right fit. It just wasn't the right fit. And one of their friends came to their defense one time and came down, and they were kind of irritated with me because I'm like, why haven't you hired this person to be an assistant principal? And I just told them, I'm like, there are in the leadership, there's what I will just call the X factor. There are things that you just need to have.
Mm.
And the smaller the team, the more things you're going to have, the more things you're going to have to do. And so when you're looking for people to fill those roles, it's not about what's on your resume. It's not about whether or not you went and got your master's. It's not about whether or not you check the boxes, with the district leadership classes. It's just, do you have what I need? Do you have what is necessary? And then when you get into high school and there's more assistant principals, then you can kind of get a little more granular with, okay, if I've got someone who isn't necessarily the best people person, but man, they're really good at data. They're really good at digging in and helping teachers understand the data behind the assessments. Okay, they're perfect. That's the exact hire for that position. But I'm never going to put them up in front of a group and expect that they're going to wow the group with humor and interactive conversations. It's just going to be here's what we're going to do and move forward. So it's so much of it is and I think this is where the frustration comes with people, like the whole mindset of, well, I'm the next one up because I've done all the stuff. Well, sometimes you're not. It's just and using, I've told people that way too many times probably, but I was like, it's all about fit. It's all about, and if someone doesn't see you as the right fit, then you don't want to be in that position because it's going to be bad. It's just going to turn out bad.
So it's probably even more challenging to hire a principal because fit has to do with the context of the school. But they do have to share a lot of those qualities. They need to know data. They need to know how to talk to people, to a staff, to parents. But maybe the same thing applies. The different complicated position to fill, and people internally often do feel like they're next up. And in fact, you create some political wars because they haven't been hired, because they're kind of in waiting. But
Right.
often people, I mean, talk about assistant principals who never make a principalship. I mean, what happens there?
You mean why they wouldn't meet
Yeah,
that?
yeah, because it's a phenomenon. I mean, it happens. People get kind of pegged in a district and never get promoted to that position.
Well, and I do think a lot of it is what I said. There are some people who can play a really good role as part of a team,
Mhm.
but they're never gonna be able to be the front runner for the team. It's just and that's just the way. I mean, it's really hard to have that conversation with people because it sounds like you're being like you're tearing them down, or you're somehow demeaning them, or saying they're not worthy. Um, but it's, again, it kind of goes back to I'm if someone doesn't want to know the truth and want to hear transparency, then don't ask me, because
Hmm.
I'm going to give it to you. But that that is some of that conversation I'd had with people of, you are great in this role, but unless something shifts, or unless campus either here or in some other district opens up that has very specific needs that you can fill those, that you're needed for, then this is the role you're going to be in. And grow where you're planted. Don't try to create something that you're not you have a chance of being less successful at, because you're going to be more miserable doing it that way. So but it's easy to say that, harder to hear it.
A little
Absolutely.
bit like the sports analogy, there are some people that are meant to be the starter. There are some people that are meant to be the backup. And the backup is not, it may be a lesser role with regards to popularity or notoriety or what have you, but it's still an essential role. It plays an essential function within the cog of the entire system, and so it's finding where you best fits.
Yeah.
Go back to
There's a
your
guy. There's a
point.
guy that I know, goes to our church, but he was in Keller. He was an assistant principal. He had tried to get job. He tried to get a job as a principal, and it just wasn't. It just goes back to that conversation. It just wasn't ever really the right fit for him at any of the campuses. He just went to another district as the director of student services. Great fit, great
Mhm.
fit. Because let's be honest, the director of student services is like the assistant principal of the district. So it is that, and I think that's what I'm talking about. Is there are leadership roles in a district. It just might not be what you have in your mind as the next thing, but there are ways to advance in a district. That doesn't necessarily mean you're jumping to principals.
I guess it just comes down to when you have that come to Jesus moment, when you realize you either are right for something or you're not right for something, your ability to be able to deal with that and then work on that.
Right.
So we've been talking about school culture primarily, but actually we've talked almost exclusively about leadership. And I mean, I'd like to maybe end with that. Is it your impression that the school leader has impact on that culture more than anybody else? Is that their primary role?
There's the book Good to Great,
Hmm.
and how it talks about, uh, like, if you establish a culture, you establish a organizational culture, that it shouldn't matter who the leader is. That if you leave, then whatever you've established shouldn't be dependent on the one person. And I agree with that. However, I've also seen where, if the person coming in is woefully under prepared to be the leader, I've seen how quickly culture can be decimated. Um, and that is, so, to answer your question, I 100% believe that it's a lot of pressure to put on one person, but if that one person can't pull off how to figure out either how to maintain or how to how to maintain a good culture or how to shift into a good culture, then it becomes a lot like what Keller High was when I got there. It individually, like individual departments and even smaller groups in the departments, they had good culture because they were just kind of, it was self-protection mode.
Mhm.
People were clustered together and taking care of each other. So yeah, we have good culture. But as a school, as a whole, the culture was awful because it just wasn't, the culture just wasn't there because it hadn't been cultivated. And it does not take long. It takes a while to get it there. It doesn't take long to tear it down. I'll leave it at
Makes a lot of sense.
that.
Well, with that, I think another great conversation, and of course we need to have you back if for another reason to give you the jacket. But nevertheless, hopefully you can come back and join us again and talk about who really doesn't matter. Just if you have the time, we love having you on. So,
Sure. I appreciate the invite always.
well, with that, we shall say adieu, Rick and Herr Dr. Bourgeois.
Thanks, everybody. Rick,
Bye, guys.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Auf Wiedersehen.